Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Northern Film Review. This week, we're reviewing the infamous, the famous Hitchcockian film Psycho. Well, it's not Hitchcockian, it is Hitchcock. We will yet again be going into depth and topics and the ideas and the themes of the film, bringing in a more wider discussion of the film as well. Hope you enjoy. The Northern Film Review with your hosts, Oliver Ellis and Luke Simpson. So, hello, yes. How are you doing, Luke?
I'm great. Thank you very much for asking.
It's a nice day today, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's fresh.
It's fresh. It's a fresh day. I like a fresh day.
Fresh day in Leeds, isn't it? Eh?
Yes,
Eh?
I'm back in Leeds now. I think perhaps I moved in lockdown, which is legal, by the way. I feel like I should preference that.
Don't shoot me.
a lot of people think it's against the COVID rules to do it. But my parents are they're both key workers, and they're both frontline key workers, and it's very very difficult for them. And I was perhaps annoying them a bit too much at home. And they were very adamant about getting me.
I see that's the same with my family as well.
Yeah, and they were like, Oliver, you can move to Leeds. You know, I've done quite a bit of an extensive research into this. I'm like, have you?
Kicking me out.
So it was interesting. And I moved all the way back up to Leeds, and it's the first time I've ever been into my accommodation, which is weird because I didn't have any accommodation for the first term because I knew we were going to have like this sort of COVID thing. I was going to wait it out a bit to see what's going on with it, and then I was correct. I am a genius, and I kind of waited it out for a bit, and then I was like, okay, practical stuff's going to start in January, and then I was going to move the week of the third lockdown was announced. And I was going to move. I think it was the day after the lockdown was announced. I was like, oh, for God's sake, I've just brought this place and now I'm wasting all this money.
Yeah. Is it student accommodation or are you gone private?
I'm not sure. Because it's Unipol.
Yeah.
So they don't do like I think they might do sort of first year housing, but they're not like part of a university.
Yeah,
but it is I would say but it's a charity, so it's not part of the government. So I'm not entirely sure. But it's quite a nice house though. It's really, really good.
House? You got a house?
No, not a house, flat.
I was gonna say.
There we go.
Nice.
And I'm supposed to have roommates, but none of my roommates are in.
Well, you got a whole thing for yourself now, haven't you? So
I have, yeah. It's good. It's both really good and really like in the daytime. It's fantastic, right? Because I can do my work. It's just fantastically
peace and quiet. Yeah,
peace and quiet, absolutely wonderful. And I'm just I'm sat here right now. I'm not going to have some sort of guy screaming in the corridor. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But at night, it is by far the scariest thing.
Yeah, isn't it? I've got crackheads living downstairs.
Yeah,
down the road. I've got.
But I think, I don't know. It is interesting, and also a thing with my door is that it kind of like it's a kind of like a slow sort of shutting door. So I sometimes think I'm like shutting the door, but I don't properly. I'm in the toilet and I just hear a door like close, and I'm like I'm really freaked out because it's like 11 o'clock at night. Like, oh God.
What's even worse is I've got a door that goes.
Oh God, yeah,
like that. It's like, oh no, is Mr. Bates going to come and get me?
Yeah. And it's truly frightening living my own, but it's also quite a lot of fun. And also you can do a lot of stuff that like people like you won't get judgment for. You can just like I don't know. You can do stuff that you've always wanted to do. I don't mean like weird sort of creepy stuff by yourself. But
well, I know I'm not going to go.
But like I mean, like sort of if you wanted to start meditating, but like someone was like, "Are you meditating now?"
Yeah, meditate in the middle of the kitchen table.
Yeah. And you're kind of responsible for all your own stuff, and it's interesting. I'm learning a lot from it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Anyway, so living my lone's fun, but I could tell you. Well, originally we were going to do this podcast, and we're going to have someone But unfortunately, he can't be on for numerous round of reasons, and we wish him the best. Um, but he suggested the film Psycho. And if you've never seen Psycho, it's Luke will explain a bit more in a
Yeah.
bit, but it's it's a very scary film. And like we said, both me and Luke live on our own. Not together, but like on our own. Um, and yeah, it's interesting because he made us watch this film. And I don't know whether he knew we lived on our own, but my God, it's just sort of
For
psychopathy to
yeah,
suggest that film.
for film like made in the 60s, it's one of the landmark films of the century, really, most influential
Mm,
films, and I think it's yeah, you're always surprised when you watch it. It's bloody scary.
mm.
For
Well,
us, we're not very avid horror goers, so we get scared at pretty much anything. So
yeah, and especially just like I don't know, I was really frightened to have a shower that night.
yeah,
And I just, oh my God, oh my days,
it's
it
one of
was,
them. I think he suggested it because it's one of them stereotypical film school films, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
It's
definitely. I
like a
think,
film that every film student who wants to go into filmmaking or anything to do with film should
mm,
watch.
yeah, and I think when I was watching, when I was doing some research, I was watching a video about it, and it was like, you should definitely watch Psycho, and it is as good as all your film friends tell you it is. I thought that was quite interesting, quite an interesting sort of take on the film. But
Yeah,
if you want to just sort of tell the people who are listening what it's about, give us a little synopsis, give us a
yeah.
little lowdown, the high down.
On the short and sweet synopsis on IMDb, which I think is really good,
Mm,
and it's a Phoenix secretary embezzles $40,000 from her
mm,
employer's client, goes on
yeah.
a run and checks in a remote hotel run by a young man and under the domination of his mother. And then during the film, there's occurrences where people get murdered, and well, from what we seem to be as the young man's mum,
Mm,
actually it isn't, and it's I think it's one of the best plot twists that I've seen. Not best, but I mean, if you haven't seen the film before,
mm,
I'd definitely watch it before listening to this because heavy spoilers.
mm,
The murderer is actually Norman Bates, the charming owner of employee and mother of the person who owns the hotel, and
mm.
yeah, he ends up being the murderer, but dressed as his mum.
Yeah, so I mean that's an interesting topic. I'll want to come on later, but so for the Rotten Tomato score, it was 96% critic and 95% audience score, which is really good. ABC Radio. Well, when I was trying, I do this sort of segment every week, trying to find sort of reviews on old films is quite difficult
Mm.
because they're not on the internet and they're not being backed up or anything. So I've had to find sort of some weird reviews on it. So ABC Radio Australia um,
Ooh.
says Psycho is the rarest of beasts. It's both art and entertainment. It's Hitchcock's best film, which is quite interesting. That's another topic we'll get on to later. Metacritic 97 critic score and a 9.1 for audience score, which is out of 10. And the Village Voice said, Psycho should be seen at least 3 times by any discerning filmgoer. The first time for the sheer terror of the experience, and on the occasion, I fully agree with Hitchcock that the congenital spoil sport would reveal the plot. The second time for the macabre comedy inherent to the conception of the film. The third time, the hidden meanings and symbols lurking beneath the surface of the first American movie since Touch of Evil to stand in the same creative rank as the great European films.
Mm.
There's a lot of words there that I
That's a
perhaps
mouthful.
that is a mouthful, and perhaps not the best written thing I've ever read in my life, but it's very pertinent, and I agree. And I like to find sort of another thing I like to do when I'm on these sort of critic websites is finding sort of random people who kind of hate these films that we really like. Um, and I put him as some guy. It says, "I watched this." I'm going to read you exactly how he typed it. I watched this movie for the first time recently, and this is the most boring, spelt with two R's, boring movie I've with no apostrophe ever seen. No full stop. So I'm perhaps not um, you know, I'm sure
Well,
he's very intelligent, but
yeah. Well, I think the reason why he's called it boring is I'm suggesting that because it's in black and white and
hmm,
it's a slow burner. But well, you can have your own opinion, but I just I don't think it's boring. I think there's lots of layers within the film, and I think there's always something to be attracted to in that film. And
hmm.
you will not get bored from it.
So I think for a while I had the sort of what before I sort of got into films properly, and I was sort of more into music and making music and all that. I kind of I was of the opinion that black and white films were awful no matter what they were.
Yeah,
And I was under that opinion, and I very much favorably had that opinion for quite a while. Um, and I think I somewhat hold that opinion still a little bit. Um, because I think some of these sort of old black and white films that are like, I don't know, you see on like Channel 5 or ITV3, and you're like,
BBC
oh my
Four.
god. Yeah, I'm like, oh god, just bear me the extremities. And I just but I think one of the first black and white films that I saw and that was really changed my opinion on it was The Artist, which is a new film that they made black and white. It's very interesting. And I think perhaps this film, Psycho, really does benefit from being in black and white. And I think, yeah, it really, really works. And I think the detail that you could see in these people's faces. I think when I watched it, I was like, when was this released? This doesn't seem like.
1960.
And I kind of thought this doesn't seem like it was released. Am I watching a newer version of this film?
Phew.
Like a
We don't
re-edit or
we don't talk about the new version of Psycho.
no, but because some of the shots were so sort of contemporary feeling and so sort of modern and interesting to me. And I think the sort of the slow the sort of the car scenes when she's like driving away and they've sort of got the camera on the car and the car's just slowly moving along and like the camera's super super still. That kind of reminded me of sort of a bunch of really contemporary um, films and TV shows like Mr. Robot, who have those sort of similar sort of tracking shots
Mm,
and stuff like that, which is really interesting to me. Um, and I just yeah, it felt contemporary, and it didn't it. And by that, I'm also insinuating that it has aged very, very, very well.
yeah.
Like it, like it's aged so well, and I can like some other films you watch, you're like, oh god, oh my god, it's dated after a week of watching it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Transformers.
Ugh.
My god, that dates quite easily. But a film like Psycho, that it it gets better.
I think, the films that do age are films that use CGI
Hmm.
and visual effects because you can clearly see when a film's made in 2003 and when a film's made in 2020, because technology advances throughout
Hmm.
the years, and it's it's clear and, well, obviously, I don't think CGI was around when Alfred Hitchcock made Psycho,
Hmm.
and I think that's there for the benefit of it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously quite an interesting sort of concept. And I think the sort of the influences that Hitchcock sort of has on film and the general wider film scape is quite interesting. And like
Mm,
I mentioned earlier, sort of influences on Mr. Robot and stuff like that. And I think, yeah, you hear so many sort of directors in interviews and stuff going like, oh yeah, Hitchcock, or I was influenced by this Hitchcock film. And it's so pertinent. And I think and it's so interesting. And I think I got a like films like Jaws
Yeah.
with the music. Jaws is like heavily influenced by the sort of music that was used in this film, which is really interesting. So it brings me on a bit more to the music of the film, which is by far fantastic.
Yeah, I
It
think definitely one of the most recognizable aspects of the film, would you say?
definitely, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it goes down in pop culture, like, it's gone down in pop culture history, really,
Mm,
especially so the main score plus, I mean, the very recognizable shower scene with the screech and, with the especially the music in that with the, violin screeches as the knife goes down, and it's been in shows like Simpsons and Family Guy, so it's really recognizable and yeah.
yeah, and I think the music is just fantastic, and I think
Mm,
it is like the main sort of recognizable thing from the film, I think. And yeah, like you said, it's parodies so much in Family Guy
yeah.
and stuff like that. And I think when I watched it, I was like, my God, I understand so many references now. And this is why I love sort of watching these sort of classic films. Um, that perhaps are very pertinent to sort of culture on a wider sort of scale is that you understand so many references. I'm like, whoa, I understand this now. I no longer just understand it from that Family Guy episode,
Yeah.
or that episode of The Simpsons where they
Like the
referenced
Treehouse
it.
of Horror, where they get influenced so much from old, horror films.
Yeah, and I'm like, I now understand that episode of this cartoon, which I don't know, I don't know what that says about me that I only understand these references from Family Guy and The Simpsons, but yeah, it's really interesting, and but it and again puts against the sort of point that how pertinent and how influential Hitchcock is to the wider sort of um, scheme of film,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. And I think another couple of points is like we've briefly mentioned throughout is the sort of the shower scene.
Mm.
So it's a very famous scene. Well, I can't remember what she's called. But
Janet Leigh.
gently, there we go. Gets killed in the shower. And she gets stabbed by Mr. Bates. Which when saying it kind of sounds a bit rude. Mr.
Yeah.
Bates. But yeah, so there's lots of interesting stuff about the scene. And I think very sort of influential for the time. Because it was like sort of a fair bit of nudity. Well, there's no actual proper nudity in it, but it is for the time. And sort of sexual explicitness, heavy violence for the time. And that sort of, real shock factor of the sort of, Hitchcock killing off the main protagonist of the
Y
story.
Within 20 minutes, I think it was.
Well, it's
Or it's like
40, 40.
40, yeah, really early on, and and Janet Leigh came into this film as probably one of the most recognizable actresses around that era, and, everyone thought she was gonna be the main protagonist in the film,
Hmm.
hopefully surviving at the end, but no, no. Killed off within 40 minutes of the film. It's like, and that's what shocks a lot of the audience really as well.
Mm. Yeah, it's really sort of this real sort of experimental way of telling a story of just killing off the protagonist just so early on, and it's super interesting. And for the rest of the film, you're kind of like figuring out who is the protagonist of the film. Is it Mr. Bates? Is it the husband, or is it what's going on? What's going on? It's very confusing.
Mm,
Um, and I think perhaps you could say TV shows like Game of Thrones was influenced by that sort of anti killing off the protagonist really early on and stuff like that.
yeah, Jon
Um,
Snow.
well, not Jon Snow, but yeah, but it's
Not
very
Jon Snow.
interesting. I can't remember what it's called, but it's not Jon Snow.
No.
But yeah, it is very interesting. But I kind of thought when I was watching it, and it's coming back to a discussion we had with Dan and Marcel in the first week, um, is because they showed quite a heavy scene of sexual explicitness in the film, and it kind of brings on the discussion of like whether it is best to show or to sort of tell
Yeah.
with the scene.
There's a
Um,
quote that I found when I was researching as well, and it was if you haven't watched him already, watch him. It's called Chris Stuckerman. He's a film review on YouTube, and it's and he went to he said to the film, it's not the gore that scares me, it's a suggestion. It's how the brain fills in the gaps.
yeah, definitely. And I think I've got wrote down in my notes as like whether you think the scene would work better if you saw the knife going in properly and there was full frontal nudity. And I don't think it would be, but and I think it does work well with the way he's doing it. I think although at the time he probably couldn't have shown full frontal nudity and
Yeah,
a knife being stuff, but I think the sort of the implication of what he's doing is there, and it sort of allows for more interesting shot choreography, and all sorts of interesting stuff like that. Um, and yeah, it's very, 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 very interesting scene. It's a very, very, very wonderful scene.
and I
Um,
think from that scene and from this film, really, the film making as we know it evolved. Really, if it wasn't for that, John Carpenter wouldn't have been able to make Halloween the way he wanted to make it, and and really, and that's I think that's all thanks to Psycho. Really, it's a film that the producers had no faith in it. Alfred
mm,
Hitchcock had no faith in it, so he decided to. And this is a true story. He decided to take a pay cut from himself and
yeah.
take a percentage of the earnings from the total revenue from the film, which
Mm.
turned out to be Blessing in Disguise, one of his
Mm.
highest grossing films, and it.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of way of doing it. I perhaps wouldn't have done that. But always take the money up front. But yeah, it is interesting. And I think one of the things as well is something that I was talking about earlier is perhaps more of a discussion point, and perhaps one of the more negative things from this film is its sort of portrayal of sort of trans characters um, in the film. So I think this is one of the first sort of proper portrayals of a trans character in film, and it kind of this is perhaps one of the sort of where terrible stereotypes of sort of um, trans people walking into bathrooms and sort of killing people is comes from a little bit. I perhaps don't know that much about it, so I won't go into that much detail. But it is quite interesting that this is one of the first sort of um, you know showcases of the trans identity in sort of bunny ears there.
Yeah,
Um, And I think it's interesting. I haven't got that much to say about it, but I just think it's interesting that this is sort of one of the first things, and there's sort of the demonized character, and perhaps this is um, something interesting to take away from this film, and perhaps to put into sort of more contemporary debates, such as the J.K. Rowling debate or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting. Definitely an interesting film. Do you have anything to say on that, Luke? Or
interesting film. In what sense? The trans debate.
the trans debate, or sort of the general sort of idea of the film, or whatever?
I- Not really. No. The trans debate is a definitely quite a sensitive one to talk about, and
Definitely.
we don't want to offend anyone really.
Yeah.
Um, but that's it really. I think there's not much really I can talk about it because I'm not like an expert in it, so
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything wrong about
No,
the
that's fair
stigma and
enough.
anything like that. So,
But I just think it's an interesting sort of point to bring up,
oh, it really
because
is.
it's
Yeah,
'cause I think there's lots of other stuff that this film does very well and very eloquently, but I think it's just something that perhaps is a historical sort of standing point within this the larger debate of that. But I think it is very interesting, and I think another thing is, uh, do you think it's Hitchcock's best film, or do you think
that's
something
exactly
like
what I was about
Birds
to
is?
ask you as well. Um, well, I think there are. I think it is one of his greatest. I think in terms of horror and everything like that, yes, definitely one of his greatest. Uh, in terms of techniques, so there are other films that gave uh, us techniques that we use nowadays, such as Rear Window with the dolly zoom, and no, not Rear Window, the Vertigo gave us a dolly zoom, and a lot more recognizable tropes even thrillers like Rear Window, North by Northwest, stuff like that. But with Psycho, I think it is one of his greatest in sense of horror and leaving us on edge and how it influenced. I think the influentiality. Oh, I don't know what word to put there, but it's such an influential film in terms of horror nowadays and how horror grew through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like I said earlier, if this film wasn't made, I don't think we would get horror as it is or as it was, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I think nowadays, even if this wasn't made, I think it would have the stigma would have grown out of it. But I think this was really a step forward for horror films, and and I do think it's one of his greatest, along with Vertigo. I think.
Yeah, I think I'm not the biggest Hitchcock fan in the world.
Oh, I
I
wouldn't say I am either.
but the guy who we were originally going to have on, I think he was quite a big Hitchcock fan. So this is perhaps why I put it in my notes. But it's yeah, I think I've seen The Birds, and again, The Birds is another. I really hope Birds is a Hitchcock film now because
It is.
I'm
It is.
starting
It
to
is. It is.
okay.
It is.
I
Yeah.
was starting to doubt myself. Then I was like, I might.
1963.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another film that's been referenced in The Simpsons, with the dolphins taking over the land.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps that was one of the first films I saw by Hitchcock, and I thought, wow, this film's great. I really love this film. But I did really like Psycho.
Yeah.
And I think just researching it and sort of researching the influence that this film had, it's so interesting and it's so engaging. And I think it's just it is just a fantastic film. Perhaps, like I said earlier on, not the best film to watch in your own, but
Yeah.
it's definitely one that you should watch because it is so interesting. It is so fantastic, and I think it's definitely just if you're interested in films, it's definitely one to sort of watch. But is it Hitchcock's best film? Yeah, I mean, the films that I've seen by Hitchcock, yes, but
Yeah.
I think perhaps I'm not the most informed opinion
Yeah.
on that subject, and I'm not the go-to person for that. But I think yeah, it is definitely a great film, and it's just I don't know. I like watching films that have had so much influence over the sort of the you know the general wider film landscape, which is something I was thinking about last night when I was researching for this podcast or radio show. Is that quite a lot of the influential films are the big landmark films that sort of influence the genre or influence the general wider film industry tends to be horror films quite a bit, I
Yeah.
think. Psycho, and not
Halloween.
of the Halloween, there we go. Hereditary, and then you've got I can't
I mean,
remember, The
for
Exorcist
yeah, for other
and
in
stuff like
other types of, I mean, Saw, even though
that.
it is very type, it kicked off kicked off its own genre from
Yeah.
that one film. So horrors are, I think horrors and thrillers do push forward the film language, the film techniques and stuff like that. Like I mentioned briefly before, Vertigo with the dolly zoom used in Jaws, which is, I think, is probably one of the most recognizable camera technique. I think really, it's such a unique technique because the way you zoom in whilst pulling the dolly out, or you push the dolly in while zooming in out. I can't remember which way it is, but it's one of the most recognizable techniques out there and pioneered. And it pioneered film, really. I think film techniques.
Sorry about that, guys. We've just cut out My internet's being very terrible at the moment. So I think what we were talking about was the influence of the horror films in the general wider thing, and how that Luke was talking about how the dolly shot in Vertigo influenced films like Jaws,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And how you were saying the most infamous shot from Jaws is that sort of Vertigo shot.
Mm.
And because full on, my internet just went out, and like we talked about at the start of the podcast, I've just moved to somewhere new, and my internet is terrible. Much worse than I am at home. So
Perks of being a student, eh?
oh yeah, one of the many perks of having to take out my own rubbish and cook my own meals and
And go
having
shopping. Oh,
oh
shopping.
god, shopping is the worst. But yeah, anyway, so Vertigo shots, lots of interesting stuff in this film. I don't know where I'm going anymore. I'm really scared that my internet's going to cut out again. Because I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm just going to have to do so much editing. So yeah, so going back to ABC Radio's Australia critique was that Psycho is the rarest of beasts. It is both art and entertainment. And that's sort of an interesting sort of topic to sort of go on there. Is sort of how sort of some films do tend to sort of, you know, take on the more of the artistic role more than the entertainment role, or vice versa. And I think this film does really balance the two very well. So what I mean by that is sort of entertainment being sort of, a film like Avengers is highly entertaining, but it's not very artistic. But a film like Tomboy by Celine Sciamma is very artistic, but it's not super entertaining.
Yeah.
Sorry, Celine. But your other film's great. But yeah, and I think that's just an interesting sort of comment to make. That is both art and entertainment, because we were both entertained by it, weren't we?
Yeah, for sure.
And it is very artistic. But I suppose one of the things that I kind of thought about is that Hitchcock has done sort of a lot of influential stuff in this film. Would you just think that's because he was one of the first people to basically just start making films, and he just happened to be on it, or do you
Well,
just think he was actually a genius?
I don't think he's like the first person to make films per
No, but
se, but
early on in the development of
early
the
on in
sort of the
development
film.
films, yes, yes and no. I think he's an absolute genius, and don't get me wrong, I think I keep saying it. He's an absolute genius. But I think yes and no with the fact that there wasn't many um directors or people going on their own way of filming. I think he was more independent than anything else because films back then, in like the 40s, 50s, and everything like that, he's they were like mass produced, weren't they? Like
Yeah,
mass produced, like they had studios pumping out films every or making films about 10 films a day or something like that, at least doing scenes 10 films scenes a day and stuff like that, mass produced. And I think Alfred Hitchcock took the time to say, no, I want to make it my own way, and then pioneered what he's done now, if you know what I mean.
yeah, definitely. And there's definitely an interesting sort of thing in it. Yeah, I think he is quite a bit of a genius, and it sort of, I don't know. I don't think it matters to me that much about whether he was a genius or whether he perhaps was one of the first
Lucky.
people to be there. Lucky, yeah. Um, I like watching his films, and I think I'm definitely going to watch a lot more of them.
Yeah.
Um, and perhaps I should watch more of his films rather than a terrible films on Netflix about people in college.
Yeah.
But I did watch one of them last night, and I perhaps enjoyed it a bit too much than I probably should have. But yeah,
Well, you watching collegey films. I've been watching hard sci-fi by Danny Boyle.
Oh my god.
Sunshine, very good film though, very good film.
Mm. Yeah, I was gonna watch Slumdog Millionaire, but I thought, you know what? I'd rather watch someone go around, have a party on a boat, and then go. Well, I'm going to Yale in the summer, but you're taking a gap year.
I'm
But
gonna take gap year too. I
uh,
love you.
let's go braid our hair in Africa. Um, there's a whole debate about why I hate people who've been on a gap years. But anyway, I'm going away from the topic of this whole podcast has been very sort of it's been an interesting one.
Yeah,
I think perhaps as we because I think I don't know whether I already mentioned this, but we've prepared a lot of our notes in preparation for having someone else on the show, and we prepared like questions and stuff, and that's perhaps why this podcast is a bit more debatey than usual. I think when we prepared our first podcast, we were doing lots of questions and lots of interesting sort of debate topics and that sort of stuff. And I think yeah, it's been an interesting podcast. This one,
yeah,
definitely. But so coming to sort of nearing the end here of me going, oh my god, what I don't know. Why did I watch this film on my own? W- is this a good film? What would you give it out of 10? Is it as influential as people say it is? And
mm, 10.
give these final thoughts.
Um, yes, I think it is influential for the horror aspects, for the horror films, and I think Alfred Hitchcock is influential. Great film as well. So I think I'm gonna give it a 7.5 to 8 out of 10. I think.
A 7.5.
I think so. Yeah, 7.5 to 8
Wow.
for you.
I think that's really quite low. Um,
Well, 8. I'll go
mm.
to 8 then. I don't.
Well,
I
no,
don't think.
don't be influenced by
No,
me. Don't be
no,
influenced by
because
me. But
I think it's a brilliant film. I think it's aged well.
yeah.
But like you keep saying, it's my. I think the opinion on me is, I think horror films are brilliant. It's not my cup of tea, but I think
Mm.
some horror films are brilliant. But I think there are loads of films, in my opinion, that are better than this.
Mm, 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 mm. Hmm. I don't know. I think so. I think it's a really good film, and I think I am going to sort of base it on more of the influences um, that
Well,
it
if we,
was sort
I
of
was gonna say
perpetuated.
I was gonna say if we're gonna base on influences, it'll be higher. But I thought we're basing on a film.
No, no, no. But no, that's fine. But I think
Yeah.
I don't know. I would give it a 9.5 to a 9.75.
That high?
Like I think it's a really good film,
Yeah.
and
Oh, you make me think now.
no, don't change the score on account of me. I feel bad now because I'm like making you feel bad for giving it such a terrible, terrible score for such a fantastic film. You evil person. But I think
No, I'm gonna give it 8. I
no,
think
don't
8.
give it
No,
an eight.
I said 7.5 to 8.
Yeah,
I think 8. I think compared to other films that we have watched, I'm
yeah,
trying to think of the other films that I've graded really.
yeah. I'm
That
trying to think of that as
yeah.
well. Like, does it stand up to the other films? I don't know.
I don't think it stands up. I mean, I don't think it stands up to Parasite really. I think Parasite is definitely probably one of my favorite films out of the films that we've watched, and I gave
Yeah.
that I think a 9.5. So I don't think it's
Mm,
up there.
mm,
But no, I'm gonna stick with 8. I'm gonna stick with 8. I think 8's great film, great influences.
mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
in my opinion, there's better films out there.
Yeah. Okay. I think it is one of the best films
Hmm.
ever made.
Oh,
And I
nice.
think I really liked it.
Mhm.
I think I don't know. I won't watch it again because it's very scary. But I think it's definitely up there. Definitely up as one of my favorite films. I think, because it's just really well made, and I don't know, I really love
Yeah.
some of the shots, and I really
Yeah.
love some of I like sort of the very linear sort of narrative that it had. And I love the sort of loads of things that it did, and just I thought some of the aspects were just fantastic.
Yeah. I
Um,
was gonna say, if you ever watch it again, when I was at college, my teacher Scott mentioned, watch it without sound, it won't be scary. I think then watch it again with the sound on, it's
mm,
probably one of the scariest films ever. Not ever, but scariest films out there. And that just brings us to the point that we talked about right at the beginning is sound and music and stuff like that. Um, Music is important in film.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's definitely like we talked about. It definitely has sort of fantastic music, and that was really pertinent to the filmmaking. I think that's probably perhaps one of the reasons why I liked it so much. Was
Yeah,
because
as a sound and music nerd yourself, I think.
yeah, as
Yeah.
perhaps as what I've done quite a bit of, and um, yeah, I think that's what it did really well, and perhaps why I like it a bit more than. And I think that it did really well. Sort of, yeah. I don't know. I just really liked it as a film, and
Mm.
it is what it is.
It is what it
But
is.
I'm sure the person who we were supposed to have on today would also agree with me. That this person might be made up or might be real. Who knows? But yeah, I love this film, and I think I'd recommend anyone to watch it because
I
it
would
is
too.
fantastic.
I would too.
And I think if you've got a spare afternoon and you don't live on your own, um, watch it, and then tag us on Instagram or something. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to check us out on Instagram, like I said, the Northern Film Review. Like we talked about it before, we've changed it to a business Instagram, which has nothing to do with anything,
Ooh.
but it's interesting sort of see our developments. And make sure to check out our YouTube channel if you're listening on our radio show, which is Northern Film Review again. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to check out our radio show, which is Saturday 12 to 1 on Lee Student Radio or LSR.
Mm.
So hopefully you've enjoyed the show. I've been Oliver,
I've been Luke.
and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.